All right, so hello everyone, and today I would like to tell you about our team's project called Caring4Dementia, which is a communication skills training application for caregivers for people with dementia. So, dementia is a neurodegenerative disease that is commonly seen in older adults, and it is usually characterized by fast progressing cognitive impairment. In the early stages, memory impairment can limit the memory processes, and in more advanced stages, it can affect the autonomy of the patients when they perform more complex daily activities. So, like bathing or dressing or eating, and many others. In fact, it is one of the major causes of disability and dependency among older adults worldwide, and the estimated proportion of people aged 60 years and older affected with dementia at any given time is anywhere between 5 to 8%. And if we look at one of the subtypes of dementia known as Alzheimer's, it increases with the age as follows. 3% of people aged from 65 to 74 years old, then 17% of people aged 75 to 84, and over 32% of people suffer with dementia that are 85 years or older. And we also expect those numbers to see those numbers rise in the future as the aging population is expected to grow. So the cognitive impairments associated with dementia affect regions of the brain that are involved in emotional processing, and as a result, approximately 30 to 90% of people with dementia suffer from behavioral disturbances, such as agitation, apathy, aggression, and sleep disturbances. And as you might imagine, it contributes to a lot of stress for their caregivers. So, if we look at the caregiver's perspective, 16 million Americans provide unpaid care for people with dementia. And these family caregivers provided an estimated 18.5 billion hours that were valued at 234 billion US dollars. So, as I have mentioned previously, behavioral disturbances that are associated with the disease can affect the relationship between the person with dementia and their caregiver. And therefore, there is a need to help those people and provide them with facilities that can help them improve their communication skills. So, there is a range of communication training programs, and usually those programs look at how to enhance the caregiver's coping skills, and also they provide the knowledge about the condition in general. So, the communication training skills can be taught in groups or one on one. Apart from that, there is a range of video materials available. There are dyadic interventions that involve both caregivers and people with dementia in active trainings. And there are also art-related music interventions or other interventions that involve any other creative activities. There are several limitations. First, most of the programs have their time constraints. Some of them take as long as 6 months to complete. Apart from that, there are high costs and needs for human resources, especially when we talk about small group or one-on-one interventions. And apart from that, there is a limitation such as generalizability. So some interventions can be too general, or on the other hand, that could be too specified. For example, there are interventions that target nurse assistants, and these highly specialized training programs can overlook some of the problems that can be relevant for family caregivers. Considering these limitations, our team decided to investigate the use of information and computer-based applications as a possible solution. And we realized that the use of a mobile application could help us achieve improvement in communication skills with people with dementia. So, according to our literature review, there are applications that serve to assist people with dementia in their daily tasks, such as eating, bathing, dressing, and many others. As well, there are applications that help with monitoring and also providing physical and cognitive assistance. For caregivers, there are applications that help to manage medication and also health information. There are applications like pill reminders, and also some other applications target caregivers' self-care and well-being, and encourage activities such as meditation and mood monitoring. However, there is no app that would target the communication between the family caregiver and the person with dementia. So to address those issues, our research team developed a mobile application called Caring4Dementia that educates caregivers on how to communicate with older adults with dementia. And it involves completion of interactive real-life scenarios that are also supplemented with the competent feedback. And on this slide, I have inserted the QR code. So if you'd like to try it right now, please scan it and you can download it. It depends whether you have an Android or iPhone. It'll work on both. So go ahead and scan it. So first, I would like to briefly cover the theoretical framework of the developed scenarios. So the scenarios were developed based on two major behavioral paradigms, and one of them is known as the behavioral skills training, or BST, and the general case training, known as GCT. So BST is a form of behavioral intervention that consists of four major blocks: instruction, modeling, rehearsal, and feedback. And in the instruction phase, the importance of the behavior is explained. Then in the modeling phase, the behavior is shown to the individual, and also all undesired behaviors are addressed in this stage. Then during the rehearsal phase, participant has an opportunity to practice the desired behavior. And finally, in the feedback stage, participant is provided with the constructive feedback. GCT training promotes the extension of generalized behavior to situations that weren't present during the training itself. So it involves teaching of several teaching examples so that the individual knows how to act in the novel situations in the future. It is also important to note that there are examples of both of those paradigms being combined in behavioral interventions, and that is the reason why our team decided to use this framework for the application. So we developed the concept of the application that simulates real-life scenarios, and the goal was to create an application that would model the desired communication between the person with dementia and their caregiver. So first, we defined the important scenarios that are common and frequent in the persons with dementia lifestyle. And the themes included anxiety, aggression, apathy, impaired judgment, resistance, wandering, hygiene, and many others. As of now, we have 56 scenarios, and completing a single scenario takes around 5 minutes. So right now, I will briefly go over a sample scenario to promote a better understanding, to explain it better. So when using the app, the caregiver is introduced to a particular situation first. Time, location, and situation is briefly explained. And as you can see in this particular option, caregiver and his mom are in the local restaurant, and the mom is struggling to make a decision on what she wants to eat. And then at the bottom of the screen, user is asked to start communicating with the person with dementia virtually. So the gray dialog box, as you can see on the top right of the screen, is a starting dialogue, and the blue one demonstrates the possible answers of the patient or an individual with dementia. At the very bottom of the screen, you can choose one of the two response options, and one is more appropriate than the other. Let's say in this particular example, our user chooses the first option right here. So if the chosen response is not appropriate, or if it could be improved in any way, the user is provided with feedback and directed to try again, as could be seen on this slide. So as you can read in the feedback, dementia can influence judgment, and it makes it difficult for an individual to make any decisions. So it is stated that it's important to not overwhelm an individual with many choice options. And then when we choose to try again, and we choose the preferred option this time, the user is again presented with the feedback and is provided with the next step. So in this very example with the meal options, caregiver is instructed to be ready to make the decision for the loved one if they're feeling lost or indecisive, and do it in a way such as it would not harm the feelings of an individual. And after that, the scenario continues. There's also a summary at the very end of the scenario to highlight the most important points so that the user remembers them better. And I would also like to note that feedbacks in scenarios usually include open-ended questions and prompts to promote better self-reflection and active learning. So the developed Caring4Dementia framework will be used to conduct a randomized controlled trial. At this evaluation stage, the app is designed to evaluate the user's perceptions and to collect the usage data, and also to provide training for caregivers. So caregivers will be provided with access to the scenarios for 30 days, but before that, they will be asked to fill out the questionnaires that regard the caregiver well-being, and also they will be asked to fill it out at the end of a 30-day long intervention. They will also be asked to fill out the questionnaire 90 days after the baseline. And after this, all the results of the questionnaires will be exported anonymously to the Excel file so that we could analyze them further. Apart from that, we will collect the usage data and we will analyze it to assess the feasibility of the application. And finally, we will compare the Caring4Dementia app to the hard copy materials with advice on effective communication. That being said, I would like to reach out to attendees and presenters of the conference. And if you know any people or institutions that would be interested and would want to participate, please reach out either to me or to the principal investigator, Dr. Amin Chirko. So now I would like to go briefly over the questionnaires that we will be using. The first questionnaire is known as the Caregiver Wellbeing Scale, and it will be used to assess the caregiver well-being. The second questionnaire is a short 10-item burden scale for family caregivers questionnaire, and it measures the changes in caregiver burden. And finally, there is an adult care quality of life questionnaire that will be used to assess the overall quality of life. The information obtained from the questionnaires pre and post training will be analyzed for research purposes to gain better feedback and to learn about the efficacy of the content of the app per se. We hope that the data collected in our experiment will help us assess and evaluate the changes in caregiver burden, change in caregivers' perceived challenges, and also resources. We will also look at the application activity volume and frequency of use that will help us improve the efficacy of the intervention in the future. The application uses a cross-platform framework called Xamarin, and it makes it available on both Android and iOS operating systems. And it's also important to note that within the app, all scenarios are organized in respective categories. So the user can simply search for specific keywords throughout the whole scenario database. As you can see on this slide, the user typed in wandering because he was interested in scenarios and wandering. And you can see on the screen that he has a list of all the scenarios that are about wandering. So to conclude, our team presents a novel mobile application for communication training for family caregivers. It is easily accessible, it's intuitive and portable, and the scenario language is understandable for caregivers, and scenarios rely on theories that encourage active learning through interaction. Finally, the advice embedded in the scenarios can be generalized, and it provides caregiver with more confidence to successfully manage the new issues that may pop up in the future. So, we expect the benefits of this novel approach will encourage the continued use of this application, and we also hope that by addressing the needs of the caregivers, we hope to improve not only their well-being, but we also hope that it will help patients to live as long as possible in a friendly and happy environment. And with that, I'm going to end my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. Your project has clear implication for our society, obviously, and then especially for the next generation, I found. I have actually used the app before, and imagine a situation like, of taking care of my own mother, which basically meant that the situation was actually changing, right? My mother was taking care of me for my entire life, but then like I'm taking care of my mother, so like, you know, I felt that having guideline there was very important, because that allowed me to actually imagine the situation very clearly.
Right. Yes. Yeah. There's lots of examples, and the way we wrote the scenarios is that there are multiple examples for each behavioral issue. So
Yeah.
one scenario didn't speak to you necessarily, the
Right.
other one might be more like relatable.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You have
How,
many there.
how did you come up with the examples for each behavior?
Right. First, we did a literature review, and we looked at the most frequent issues that can happen with that arise with people with dementia. So usually it's anxiety, wandering is a big problem, and because those are behaviors that are potentially dangerous for an individual. Agitation, not recognizing people, memory issues, those all are very frequent with, they're very common. So we addressed those scenarios, and it was the combination of experience and literature and also some creative process. Yeah.
So you had some brainstorming session with other people?
Yes, that, and also discussion, and also my personal experience from volunteering at the retirement home with people with dementia. Yeah.
Maybe I can comment on that. So to all what Anna explained, we also did something, it looked like detail, but it's important to notice. We dealt with a communication expert who is a member of the tactile robotics team. And this person took the last version of our content and built it in a way it looks like in very lay language as the one we use in houses, especially when we are older person or a person affected with dementia. So that, because when we do literature, we have complex sentences sometimes and complex terms. And when we look at any like information online, sometimes it sounds like automatic and sophisticated, etc. So last step again was to work with this communication expert from Tactile Robotics to make it like sounds natural, like our communication here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And then we have more questions. Thank you so much for the question, Iri. Yes, another question from Hamed Sharif. Is it necessary for the caregivers to revisit that training after completion? And also when revisiting, do they have to go through all the choices, or are they presented with a summary of the scenarios they have completed?
That's actually a great question. Just for the RCT itself, the intervention is 30-day long, but all the participants will get to keep the application so they can use it. It's actually available now, so they can have access to it whenever they want, and that's why we think that's a very good that's a benefit of the application when compared to other communication skills training programs for caregivers. Actually, in terms of returning to the same scenario again, I'm not too sure. Our technical expert from the team can be able to comment on that if Amir is here.
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, so if I understood the question right, can the person come back to the same scenario and start, like, does it start from the very beginning, or is it just providing the summary?
Hello everyone. So the thing is, the user is presented with the whole list of scenarios, and every scenario that the user goes through once and finishes successfully, it just gives a check mark to indicate that the user has passed that scenario already. But at any given time, if the person wants to remember or just go back and go through the guidelines again, can just re-enter the scenario, and it starts exactly the same way as before. So there is no indication that these are the correct answers. It would be, again, another interactive training.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Samira Rahimi, my girlfriend, about that. So I have two questions actually. First, about the content validity. Like, did you validate your content with healthcare professionals, the content for that you use in the application? And the second question is that did you use user-centered design approaches and involve caregivers when you were designing this application? Thank you.
Thank you for those great questions. So in terms of validation with caregivers, that's actually the step we're at right now. We are recruiting the caregivers. We're looking for people, but within our lab, all the members of our lab had been exposed to those scenarios and agreed on the internal validity of this. Yeah, but that's something that we are looking forward to be working in the future. That definitely is on our list. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other questions? We still have a few more minutes, but maybe we can move on to the next one. Thank you so much for the great presentation, Anna.